and regulations. The game of golf was as varied as the people who played it. The earliest known versions of golf were played possibly simultaneously by the Scots and the Dutch. A game played with a club, golf or golf in Dutch, called golfspel, has been traced to several cities in Holland dating to the 15th century, but one historian sees evidence of the game as early as the end of the 13th century. Golfspel was typically played on ice with wooden clubs and balls, and, despite the similarity, is not the direct antecedent in name or in play to modern golf accord. In the West, a variety of games roughly resembling golf may date back to before the time of Christ. Ball and stick games were performed as fertility rituals by early Persians and resembled such modern-day sports as polo, cricket, baseball, handball, or tennis, and last but not least, golf. In the East, evidence has been uncovered of a game called Chuiwan, from words meaning to hit and ball, that was played with a set of 10 clubs. Lanzhou University's Professor Ling Hopling dates the game of the nobility to AD 945 and suggests Mongolian travelers transported the game into medieval Europe. There are other claims to the game, ranging from archaeological evidence to illustrations in books. But the Scots maintain that the first extant modern game took place in Scotland, being the first version to use holes instead of targets. It is not, however, clear whether that was the precise game being played in the earliest known reference, a 1350 stained glass image of a golfer in Gloucester Cathedral. Dutch ball makers were certainly exporting their products to Scotland in the 14th century, and the most common theory has the Scots adapting the game to their unique land. The long stretches of space where arable land connects to the sea became the site of the first golf courses. Scots referred to that undulating sandy ground near the shore as links. Modern golf courses, also called links, simulate the natural obstacles of mixed terrain that challenged the first golfers. It would be several centuries before the game evolved into the more formally organized, technologically superior version of the sport the world plays today. There are, however, a few milestones recorded in the history of golf that lend legitimacy to the development of golf as a competitive sport. In 1457, the game was briefly banned by King James II because it took time away from the critical practice of archery that was important for adopted by the Lithe Links and went on to become the official governing regulations of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club at St. Andrews, the old course and spiritual birthplace of modern golf. Sometime in the 17th century, players who could afford it began replacing the classic wooden ball with an expensive leather ball called a featherweight for its stuffing of goose down or chicken feathers. Featherweights varied in size and weight and had a short lifespan, but enjoyed a burst in production on the island under the direction of James I. The technology that truly impacted the sport, meanwhile, emerged with new materials from around the world and with new methods of production that came out of the Industrial Revolution. The gutta-percha ball was developed in 1845. Gutties were made from gutta-percha, the gum or sap of various Malaysian trees. The rubber-like material was initially rounded by hand before molds were developed to speed up the process. In a few years, experience showed nicks and gouges to the hard-cured material helped regulate flight patterns, so the manufacturers began chiseling irregularities into the balls. The original modern ball that would eventually replace the gutties was first developed in 1898 and virtually perfected 10 years later. Akron, Ohio's Goodrich Rubber Company's executive Colburn Haskell developed a two-piece ball with a core of wound rubber and a shell of palata, a gum of a tropical American tree. After initially having the rubber cores painstakingly wound by hand, Haskell enlisted mechanic John Gameter to develop a machine to do the work. Gameter eventually patented his machine, and the resulting product, now a three-piece ball with a special core on which the rubber was wound, was taken out for a test run by Haskell and professional golfer Joe Mitchell. The world's biggest golf ball mold manufacturer, meanwhile, had gotten a hold of Haskell's bramble-patterned ball with raised bumps. The bumps on the surface eventually smoothed out with use, leading the firm's William Taylor to dimple the ball instead, creating the advanced aerodynamics that took an already highly mobile, bouncy ball to greater and sometimes maligned excessive distances. But no matter. Innovators of the game had also recently developed a lathe to standardize and mass-produce wooden clubs and heads, which combined with forged iron approach clubs, and those forces combined to make golf increasingly more accessible. The first golf professionals from England and Scotland made names for themselves at the early years of the British Open, which was founded by the Royal and Ancient Society in 1860. The first British Open was comprised of 8 participants and was won by Willie Park, Sr. Park and arch-rival old Tom Morris combined with young Tom Morris to win 11 of the first 12 championships. English and Scottish settlers began transplanting the game to new territory, from India to Canada and perhaps most importantly to the United States. Of course, the fact that fans of the game were already developing new technologies alone makes golf's presence in America important to the history of the sport. But golf professionalism took on new levels in the early matches and exhibitions in the United States. The game had long been around in America when Scottish immigrant John Reid first took up a club in 1888. Reid, known as the father of American golf, took an instant liking to the game and founded the St. Andrews Golf Club. Other clubs and courses followed until in 1894, 5 clubs joined under the name of the United itself as the de facto governing body of golf in America and immediately launched the U.S. Amateur and U.S. Open Championships at the Newport Golf Club in Rhode Island. Exhibition golf was held on courses everywhere, showcasing some of the biggest professional names of the sport while drawing attention to a course and its community. One of Great Britain's greats from the turn of the century was Harry Vardon, America's first sporting goods manufacturer. Spalding sponsored a major exhibition tour that featured Vardon using one of their new gutta-percha balls. The ball, of course, would not enjoy much success in light of the emerging Haskell ball, but the events were well attended, showing that Americans had developed a keen interest in the sport. That was important for American national pride, as the sport was dominated by naturalized Americans in the early years of the sport in the United States. The first golf champion born in the United States was John McDermott, who won the U.S. Open in 1911. American golf was rising in prominence by the time the Professional Golfers Association of America was created in 1916. That was 3 years after an American dark horse amateur named Francis Ouimet shocked Vardon and professional Ted Ray by winning the U.S. Open in 1913 and capturing the imagination and naturalistic pride of Americans, even those not interested in the sport. Ouimet set the stage for professional Walter Hagen, one of the first golfers to achieve celebrity status throughout the show business of golf. Hagen stood out for a lot of reasons, from flamboyant dress to his often wild play and personality, but he was also a brilliant golfer and showman, what historian Al Barco calls the first professional golfer, as opposed to golf professional. He made his living related to the game, which means a primary distinction from golf amateur status, who are further prohibited from accepting larger sums of money as prize for play. Most importantly, Hagen played his profession far and wide, putting on a show and generating a fan base and new generation of golfers all over America. Finally, in 1922 and 3 more times that decade, Walter Hagen won the British Open, no longer just an undisputed champion in America,